right, so what we're doing tonight is hopefully a fairly straightforward Salt and Aria Automation Config setup. I'm kind of simulating an air-gapped environment here, so I've actually kind of grabbed all the packages that I need just so that we know that there's no smoke and mirrors here. Let's just really quickly kind of look at what I grabbed and where. And so we'll get into the salt part in just a second. But in terms of the proprietary materials, if I go to Customer Connect and I'm in, that's not it. If I'm in all products here and I kind of make my way down the list, if I look at Aria Automation, go to View Download Components there, I'm actually going to look at 8.12 as the latest, and so here I am looking at VMware Aria Automation Config 8.12.1. If I do go to downloads, it should give me my kind of 4 operating system options here as far as installation candidates. And so I did grab this 308 meg, the tar gzip of the primary installer itself. And then again, because we're doing SecOps here, and we're simulating an environment. Actually, you know what? It occurred to me. I need to grab a product key if I'm going to be using SecOps as well, but I'll worry about that in a second. Um, but grab the SecOps content, which is available on the Drivers and Tools tab here. When you go to Downloads, it gives you the options for the actual content packages, either in FIPS compliant or non-FIPS compliant versions. So there is the stuff for the compliance data in both of those flavors. Obviously, those tend to be a little smaller. It's all just the state data and the metadata associated with that. And then we also have the protect or the vulnerability management, patch management type stuff in there as well. So ultimately, all those things are in there for now. We'll kind of go through a little bit of how to use those. And then on the salt side, if we're looking at the salt project at large, most of that has been reduced to the install guide. So if I go to repo.saltproject.io, it gives me this. I'm actually going to click over to the install guide here. And here in downloads, it gives me the opportunity to browse through the repository to find individual things. So I actually am using CentOS Stream 8 today. Could do this on, RHEL or something else. This is going to be the flavor for today. So I'm actually just going to go browse through the repo, normal HTTP or FTP style repository browsing. And I'm just going to jump into latest. And here I grabbed the 3006.1 of Salt, the base package, as well as Salt Master and Salt Minion. I know I'm going to need all of those. The others I can kind of skip and should be okay there as far as all of that goes. So that's all the stuff that I have in front of me, just kind of starting out. That should give me enough to kind of get moving. So like I said, I'm going to pause in a couple places, and I know for one thing I need to grab a working key, which I don't happen to have in front of me, so I'll have to steal that from another environment or something. But for now, let's just kind of move on and do this. So, essentially the first thing that I'm going to do, typically right now I am the CentOS user. I will just, to humor everybody, I'll pretend that I typically do things correctly, and I will do everything through sudo like I should for audit purposes or whatever. So in this case, I'm going to use Yum. I think DNF is available to me since I'm on Stream 8, but let's just use Yum for the sake, old time's sake. And this will allow me to handle installations via the direct RPM paths. I'm actually in this directory already, so I can just grab, let's start with the base salt. And we'll let it think about what it's doing. It actually, this machine is brand new. It's never done anything, so it's actually going to glance at its repos really quick, but if I do this right, we shouldn't be bringing in any dependencies. We should be solving all of that with Salt Wonder. So it should have everything that it needs kind of self-contained in the Python environment that it builds for itself. Oh, there is a dependency here that I'm going to grab using PCI utils. So um, that's worth kind of examining as a call out. There may be times where you're are cloning things or something like that, depending on what's needed. It's possible there's some oversight in what we do or don't include. Ultimately, that's kind of what informs which things are supported platforms, which things are not. So it's worth noting. Ultimately, not an impossible to solve thing. You could find a PCI utils RPM if you needed to. Let's do. I guess it doesn't really matter. Minion installation looks good. And we'll handle the Salt Master installation as well. So in a typical environment, an internet connected environment, I'd be okay with mounting repository. There are instructions on repo.saltproject.io that go through pretty much those similar things. So handling the import of the GPG public key for the signing key as well, and then grabbing the actual repository, throwing it into a salt repository in your Yum repositories. So ultimately, that's a thing that is possible to do, and then you can just run through the individual installs, allow it to grab it from repo. That's what I would typically do. That's effectively what the Bootstrap script does as well. If you have those as an option, I'm just trying to kind of give everybody attention and make sure that we're aware that there are other ways to do this. Doesn't have to specifically be done exactly that one way. Um, so kind of the next part of this is I did promise somebody that I would kind of take apart the multi-node installation, and we'll run this as a single node installation. But I did want to kind of run through the process just to kind of demonstrate how this installer is. I shouldn't have tried to open that. How this installer is kind of structured and put together and all of that. So the first thing that I will do actually is beyond simply Googling how to do my job, salt stack config installation, and docs are in here somewhere. And that'll be for on-prem. 8.11, I think, is the latest documentation version available, so that should be okay. Using and managing. No, I actually wanted an install guide. You can tell how often I do this. There it is. Okay. Installation. So this kind of goes through taking apart the dependencies, what operating systems are supported, what Postgres and Redis versions are there. There is a demand for JRE or Java 11. It's worth noting that this is specifically if you're using the translation bundle. We have ways to kind of quietly disable that if that's not a thing that is of interest to you. But if you have overseas or branch offices or something like that, or you need something like right to left language support, then that's a possibility. It's supported. That is the way to get it. Otherwise, you don't really need Java here. It goes through a little bit of discussion of Salt version and what Python versions we're shipping, as well as where we're going to need to poke firewall holes if that's a thing. And then taking care of any if the JWT library isn't already available, here's how to get it. And then there's some additional considerations, considerations for air-gapped systems, things like that. But those things are kind of taken care of here. We've done a lot of the basic stuff, including installing Salt and Salt Masters. So those steps are kind of taken care of. I'll jump in and handle the initial configuration of the master in just a second, but there are some things that we'll kind of take apart as far as the typical install, just to make sure that things look the way that we want them to. It's worth noting that installation of Salt on air-gapped systems does bring up the Salt Stack Crystal package. That really isn't used anymore for the most part. We've solved a lot of that in the Wonder installations, and that's a change as of 3005.1 and 3006.1. So, worth kind of keeping that in mind, but we should be okay there. I'm going to run through and actually take care of a couple little housekeeping items in my configuration before I fire everything up. So it's worth noting that I will do a couple things here, like let's make this minion ID for this guy is going to be called Braz. And then in the minion.d, I'm going to make this a single node installation. So we're actually going to go here, and I'm going to set the master to localhost here. And I will tee that to etc salt master dot, oops, sorry, minion.d master.conf. Good. Okay. All right. What else? We will have a couple of master options to change, but that's really going to be when we're doing some things on um, the RAS configuration side, the master plugin. So I'm not going to do that yet. Should be able to now. Sudo system control start salt minion and salt master. And in a second, so I'm not root, I should see an unaccepted key here. I don't know. What did I do? Did I spell it wrong? There it is. I don't know why that took so long today. No big deal. Salt key. Yep. Okay. We'll accept the key for RAS. We can prove that things work by doing salt RAS test.ping. Good. We can do, I don't know, whatever else to do. Salt RAS test.version. Don't have any states to really examine. We'll take that apart when we're doing the salt stack config or the Aria Automation config installation in just a second. But that looks good for now. Okay. Kind of next step here, we'll need to take apart the installer here, and looking at the installation instructions, transfer and import files, basically what I already did. Grab the installer version and those things. And then going through installation, this is where it kind of, if we're doing this as a multi-node installation or we're not, or whatever we're doing, grab the data for those individual nodes that we're going to configure. In this case, we're configuring these all on a single device, but I'll kind of take apart the typical installation script and show you what that looks like. So there are a couple of things that this has you do. If you want to set custom minion IDs, it basically already did that. You can either modify the it says minion.conf. It's actually just minion, etc salt minion. Or you can place any of those, any key value type opts. You can just throw into um, the actual minion.d or the master.d directory as appropriate. All right, so now it's going to have us kind of unpack some of the stuff um, in the state tree, just grabbing things from the SSE installer. So if you haven't already, we're going to, do I want to do it here? Yeah, it should be okay. I'm just trying to think if I'm going to run into permissions issues later if I don't do this as root. Probably should be fine. So let's tar x vzpf. Let's grab that whole guy. So this should make an SSE installer subdirectory here. And so we will take that apart in just a second and start working on some of the aspects of that. That should be fine for now. We're not going to worry about the SecOps stuff just yet until we get everything installed and up and running. So where are we? So let's kind of jump in to the installer itself. Let's actually look at, if we look at the setup single node bash script in here, there's setting up some of the output messages and things like that. But essentially what this script does is it checks if you're root. It will give you a message, what is it, this one here? This script must be run as root. So you will have to sudo this if you didn't already, just in terms of handling some of those things. And then it kind of runs through some of the typical things, really just, advising whether or not Java 11 is present, checking out where it is, making sure, or actually inspecting whether or not the master and minion are already installed, and then advising as to that specific status. If there is an existing install, then we skip that. Otherwise, it'll handle the installation of one or another. In this case, using Salt Stack Crystal. Again, a thing that ultimately will probably go away in the next couple of versions as we move into using Wonder full time for everything. Um, check on a couple of things, pretty much the same thing that I did. Echo master as localhost into etcsaltminion.d master.conf, exactly what I did. And then echoing the salt master ID into etcsaltminion ID. Again, same thing that I did manually, the command line. Start the master and minion. Actually, occurs to me I didn't enable it, but hopefully that's not a big deal yet. Maybe I'll do that in just a second when I jump out of this less. So then it's going to wait. It will check whether or not the master ID file, the actual AES key for the master exists in minions pre. If it doesn't, then it'll just wait, and it'll keep looping that. And once it does, it will accept the key for that specific minion. And then after that, we should be good. It goes on to handling the finite installation of single node, so it will actually instantiate using its local directory as the salt config, and then just kicks off. State.sls is the same as state.apply. It runs the SSE state, which should handle the installation of all four parts: the database, the cache in Redis, the application server itself, and the master plugin. So it should just typically in a single node installation just run through all of those. We're actually going to take those apart and go through a little bit of more purposeful configuration, but we should get there. So no big deal. All right, so it wants me to make the file root for serve salt. Wants me to grab everything from CentOS. So grab the existing state tree data from the installer and throw it into file roots. make serve pillar and grab the pillar data and throw it in there, and then ensure that the pillar top file as well as the state trees top file are present in there. So let's do that. So we can see there's nothing in serve right now, so we can sudo make dir salt, and we'll do the same thing for pillar. And then we'll jump back here. Let's jump into the SC installer, and so we wanted everything in pillar. So I can actually just cheat a little bit. So I can just copy everything that's here and throw it into serve pillar. Really? All right. And I can do the same thing with the state tree. So I can cp all of that into serve salt. All right, so now I'm approximately where this was. I didn't take the time to separately do the individual top files, but we should, if we look, we should see that those are there. So we can jump into serve. Let's look at pillar first, since that was what we did first. We can see the top file is there, and the SSD pillar data is in there with SSD settings.yaml, so we should be okay there. If we jump into the state tree, we see that there's a top file, and then there are all of the SSE state, the API cache database service plugin. And so I think we are probably good there to move on. Okay, so now it's going to have us go into sort of pillar and inspect the top file. So here it wants us to make sure that where if you took the time to record which machines are going to take on which specific things, then it'll have you do that. So for server and SSC servers, go through these guys. So in this case, in that load YAML step there, it's going to have you kind of run through those individual guys. So it's servers in this list will receive all of the SSE pillar information, which should include all of the config options that we're going to kind of go through when we take apart the SSE settings.yaml. So let's jump in there. I was actually hoping to do this on this side, and I might actually cheat and just be root and do that so that I can use the editor. That might be a little bit more comfortable. So let me pause really quick, and I'll make that change right now. Okay, so I became root. I hereby apologize to every Linux security engineer. We are going to go through some of the pillar data modification here. So we can see here they kind of pre-populate some of this stuff. Again, in this case, we are specifically looking at minion IDs here. So in my case, I named my minion I should name my minion Roz, and I'm 90% sure that I did. So that's the only guy that's in here. So I'm going to clear out everything else. Ultimately, that one machine will be the guy that receives all of this data. So it's going to say that the SSE server's Jinja variable is everything that you see here, which is in this case just this one guy. So all of the individual servers in this list will be assigned the data for SSE. So I'm going to save that. This little bit of modifying things at the system level is pretty much the only reason that I decided to become root. Yeah, I realize that it's cheating, but that's how it goes. Okay. And then we're supposed to apply high states to the nodes. Did I skip something? Maybe. Let's see here. It's weird. It's supposed to tell me to modify scsettings.yaml somewhere. Maybe it doesn't care anymore. I haven't really poked through some of this stuff for a little while. I wonder if maybe we're not really using this anymore and we streamlined it, but some of the old stuff is kind of clanking around in here. So what you used to have to do is modify these guys individually. But maybe if we're assuming that we're making a Postgres installation, then we kind of skip some of those. Interesting. Apply high states to the nodes. And huh. Try to list the minions. Fresh pillar items. Huh. Okay. Maybe this has been more streamlined than I am thinking. Let me know if there are any issues with this. This used to be a little bit more involved. We used to do things like, if you were running Postgres already, you have a DBA team who does those things or something like that. Then we kind of expose that so you can just kind of consume that information. And this ultimately was where it would draw these things from. So this init.sls should be what it tells it those things come from. So let's see. Okay, so are we installing SCAPI standalone? No, it's still doing import YAML SSE settings as SSE. So set scpg server equals sc.servers.pg server. So it's still looking in the YAML to see if that's defined. And then that's the only place it's really doing that. So if we're doing standalone, then FQDN is localhost, and we're listening on 127.0.0.1. That should be fine. Those things don't change. PGFQDN, PGGrains, SC.servers. Okay, so we're still looking specifically for those. Okay. Okay, so it's looking in grains cache to see where the salt master is. Okay, well that might work. Okay. So it does some basic information gathering, like it looks at how many CPUs there are and takes care of some of the basic configuration and stuff like that. So it looks like there's not too much to need to massage, but these are some of the things that I might look at if you're having some issues there. So what do they tell me to do? They want me to just high state all the nodes, refresh grains, target a list of minions. It's just kind of giving you a little tutorial on some basic targeting in case you need to know what you're doing. Okay, and then okay, so kind of diagnostically, here's how you can check if the pillar data is populating. It's also a good reminder that if you do something like that, that somebody who has root access to your salt master can compel individual machines to reveal their pillar information, which that's ultimately a interesting IP or FQDN of Postgres server here. Hope that doesn't affect how these things go, but let's I never touched any of these things and it's been fine. So hopefully we're okay. Um, all right, and then it basically says for each of the machines, run through and then high state them. I'm actually not going to high state them because in this case that would, because everything's being installed on one machine, that would end up uh, resulting in running all of those against, running through the entire installation. I'd kind of rather, if you look at the way that this is structured, pretty much what it's doing is it's going to look at the expected Postgres server and it's going to make it run the API database. For the Redis machine, it's going to make it run the API cache. For the actual application server, it's going to run the API service and install RAS. For the master or for any masters, it will handle the master plugin installation. So I really think we can kind of just do those things in that order. It's worth noting that you have visibility into what all of these things are. There are sane defaults attached to most of the things so that if it doesn't see set information when it's trying to do its pillar gets. If it doesn't grab anything from there, then it will use Salty API. Before I go all the way on this, let's just look at like PG endpoint. Probably it won't be asking for PG endpoint in this, but let's just look. No. So that would probably be in the actual service configuration. So let's look through this guy. Okay, so it is expecting to see SCPG endpoint. So if we don't see it set, then it will default to localhost. But if it is set, which right now it's set to that, then I'm going to have a problem. So I actually do need to go back and I need to fix some of these guys. Okay, good to know. So here, this is going to be localhost. Salty API. Oh, that's weird. Usually, formerly it was always salt underscore EAPI. That should be okay. HPA by IP. That's fine. CertCN localhost. Okay. Redis endpoint is localhost. Salt Redis. API username is root. Password is going to be salt. Super secret. API endpoint is going to be localhost. Yeah. SSL will be enabled. SSL certificate validation will be disabled by default. We're not doing this as standalone just because I want to run through I want the full experience. Not running as a failover master. This is the default, or it's not it's the default key. I should be generating this. I don't know. I'll have to think about that. Okay. Generate cert CNs. Use customer ID, and let's change this cluster ID to simply, I don't want to also call it RAS. Let's just call it salt. Okay. That should be enough. Let's just run through pillar.items one more time and see if there's anything that is glaringly boilerplate stuff that needs to be corrected. No. Okay, cool. So I should be able to just run through, so I should be able to salt RAS, state.apply, and let's do ssc.eapi database first. Let's do this at info level so we don't have to wait to see everything that it's doing. So while it's thinking about this, it's worth noting that for the most part, um, most or all of the things you need are kind of prepackaged in here. The RPM for Postgres 1310, as well as contrib, lib, server, All the things you should need to run Postgres are in here. Um, it occurs to me I didn't double check PyOpenSSL, although we're using Wonder, so it's probably in there anyway. And looks like I don't see any problems, so we might be okay there. Formerly, when PyOpenSSL wasn't always considered in distutils salt installations, you had to kind of double check that those things were there and jog its memory, or else the TLS self-signed cert creations would fail. Okay. 5 targeted packages were installed and updated. Bunch of Oh, interesting. So it did bring in some Perl stuff that probably um probably was not packaged in there. Okay. Well, there might be some more R cloning in your future if you run into something like that and you're in an air-gapped environment. That's good to know. This will at least enumerate all of those things. Um, Initialize the database, so run initdb to kick that off. Make sure that the cert path at cpki postgres certs exists. So it created it just now. Make a self-signed cert. Ensure that this has the correct permissions. It belongs to user and group Postgres, and this is the cert. This is the key. That they're in mode 400, so user readable only, and then it spits out a Postgres config. There's only a couple of really notable things in here. Um, so this is the actual finite diff of what it removed and added. Um, some buffer, actually it doesn't even change what was there, just different comment text. So probably distutils and we had different ideas of what should be in there. Probably, hopefully, minor things. So far, these things seem to work, so probably all right. Let's see here. Auto vacuum settings. Um, so probably the major parts where things were changed were listening ports and those kind of things. PGHPA. This is going to be so local is going to be trust. So local connections from localhost will just happen. So we should be good there. Postgres 13 service was enabled. That's a good reminder for me to system control enable salt master and salt minion because I didn't do that the first time. There we go. Cool. So those things are good. Postgres is running. You can see that for yourself. Postgres QL 13. Is that how we do it? Yep. Okay. So that looks good. That is the database. So now we can salt RAS state.apply sc.eapi cache. We'll handle the Redis installation. I'll still do this on info, although it may not be super helpful. It's actually more helpful during like orchestrations to kind of tell you what step you're on. But okay, cool. The Redis config file, actually, much to my Oh, we're on Redis 6 now. Nice. Much to my great pleasure, includes everything you'd ever want to know, although it looks like we actually take out most of it. So it looks like this is probably going to probably ends up being a relatively sparse config file without all the distutils explanations of everything commented out ever. Where did it put it? etsyredis.com. That's probably a good place for it. I bet you it's much shorter now. It's still pretty lengthy. Okay. All right. So that's fine. System control status Redis. We should see that it's up and listening, which it is. Good. On 6379. And now we can run through the next two things that we'll need are we need to put the API service up first, and we need to do the master plugin second. If we do the master plugin first and handle its configuration, it will look for an Aria Automation config server that isn't there. So I don't need to sudo salt raw state.apply sc.api service. Of course, this is the time I didn't do it on info, and it might actually be a long enough state to give me early information on what parts of the state are running. My bad. All right. So that guy's gonna think for a little bit. So just kind of recapping what we did, we ran through the database installation. All the files are kind of all except for the some of the Perl packages and things like that that apparently it needed are there. Log rotate and Redis, and as well as that Redis configuration are in there. Now it's running through the API service. The init.sls is this one that will kind of run through um, actually a goodly number of steps. Making sure that the PKI path is there for the self-signed certs, handles a lot of OpenSSL and XML libraries, crypto type stuff to handle some of the prerequisites for salt stack config or Aria automation config itself. Handles the installation finally of the actual application. Um, Reloads daemons now that the installation has happened. Um, Takes care of creating self-signed certs, or in the config YAML if you did that, ships in certs that you provide. That brings us down to checking those permissions, making sure that RAS owns everything in its own directory. Let's see, handling some of that initial configuration, so handling the RAS Jinja. This is what populates etc RAS. We'll look at that in just a second because we'll have a couple of things to kind of poke at there. Um, but handle saving the credentials, so grabbing whatever you had in your config and committing that using the RAS binary itself, using RAS save creds to create an encrypted file so that you can do essentially pre-encrypted or token entry to allow um, future login to both Postgres and Redis. Um, Ensure the permissions for that RAS secconf file, um, ensuring that the directory looks the way it should. etc RAS PKI belongs to RAS and is in mode 700. Um, and then let's see, looking here, making sure that RAS.key exists. If not, it'll wait until it generates it. Make sure that it belongs to RAS. Run LD config, and then what did I say that? Load config. Um, Start the actual service. Make sure that it's enabled, and then some other things under some conditions. Get the initial objects and then uh, throw them in there, restart the service if necessary. So let's just kind of confirm that those things happened. It looks like everything succeeded. Am I looking at? I'm looking at Redis config now, aren't I? Yeah. All right. So this is the start of that state run. Install XMLSec and those other things. Install the RAS RPM itself. We're good there. Do daemon reload. Do PKI path. Create the self-signed cert and key. Make sure that those permissions look the way they should. Handle the RAS configuration here. We'll double check this in just a second, so there's no need to kind of run through that yet. Make sure the PKI directory is there. Set the RAS key if it's not already there. Do save creds. Throws some warnings, but ultimately it works. Setconf permissions, making sure that everything in PKI, in RAS PKI belongs to RAS. Load config, services running. Restart RAS and confirm connectivity. get the initial objects file, throw that in there. So we're using ROS dump to take a JSON payload to populate those initial jobs, test.ping and status beacon and those kind of things, and then restart the ROS service just to be sure. So here's where I'm going to break in just a second to grab my my key file from probably another machine somewhere. But we're almost there. We don't have the master plugin installed yet. Um, and so ROS ideally, um, system control status ROS should already be running. That looks good. We see the last thing in the log is it talking about its celery queues. So that's probably fine. Let's look at etc ROS, the actual config file. So this looks pretty much how I think should expect. It's talking to localhost in this case. Its Redis URL is localhost 6379. Its self-signed certs live in etcpki ROS certs. It's connecting on port 443, all those good things. Getting down to some of the other things, there are definitely some tunables in here. For the most part, you probably shouldn't need to touch them most of the time. We can do mandatory login banners and things like that. Actually, here is where I will touch the VIP URL to get it to stop complaining about the fact that I didn't install Java. And let me just double check myself on what that's supposed to look like. I think I can just set it to none. But let me double check. Where would I have put that if I had put it somewhere? There it is. Yeah. Okay. So let's do that. Etsy, ROS. Let's go to the bottom, new line in here. So these will be the opt directives. Let's just double check it's not in here somewhere else. No, okay. This line will be the end of that. VIP URL. I think you can just give it none and it will be fine. Okay, file already exists, I expect. Stale PID file exists, removing it, that's okay. Okay, probably fine. All right, let me grab that license key really quick. It's in another window, so this will take just a second. And through the magic of video pausing, it will take even less. All right, be right back. All right, okay, I did that. Care of installing the license key. Actually didn't confirm yet whether or not that happened. But normally I have a thing that checks here, let's just see, do I have another environment where I do this? No, I'm just going to use the EC2 console and cheat a little bit. Okay. Use this guy. 34, 213, 102, 202. That looks good. Root salt, super secret. 13 days left on the license. I was gonna disable the autumn package updates and do the manual import. Well, okay. So that doesn't necessarily break it. But let me do this. System control, stop, ROS, really quick. Okay, So let's disable automatic update of SecOps content. That's gonna be in here somewhere. No, not there. Where are you? Oh, ingest on boot. Okay, so it actually says in the config, if true, saltstack, so this is the opt here is download enabled. If true, saltstack content downloading is enabled, it should be false for air-gapped systems. Okay, so for the purposes of what we're doing today, it can be false there. Control start RAS. And then ideally, this is how this should go. Wrong window, sorry. But if we look here in terms of how we do this for configuring saltstack SecOps, this should give us some of that additional info on handling the manual ingestion of those things. So that's still sitting in home CentOS right now, so I'll have to grab those guys. So here is where it kind of discusses download enabled being true versus false. And yeah, there it is. So that's for vulnerability, that's for compliance. So, okay, I'm gonna grab this. It's gonna be ROS C. Oh no, this is sudoing as ROS to do ROS ingest. Okay. Verify the permissions of locked RGZ are set to ROS ROS. Okay. I guess for for those purposes, then let's home CentOS, and let's just move star dot e2 to let's see ROS. It's not really great. Chon ROS star dot e2. It's probably okay as what is that? That's like 5 or sorry 6. No. Uh, yeah, 664. Okay. Um. Okay. So let's secure where I am. Path to. Okay. Let's see. Roz locked hard. Well, okay. It's not called that. It's called this. Okay. Roz ingest. Absolute path. Decrypting, extracting. So if it does that, then we're probably okay. Now the worst thing that might happen is I was already on a newer version and it will complain about that. It looks like it has an update from more recently than what I grabbed from Customer Connect. So it probably will complain about that, but we'll see. It succeeded. I actually kind of don't like that it succeeded in giving me old data. Does this change now? What did you do? Did I break? Did I break RAWs? It's okay. That's weird. I wonder why I did that. Nope, that's me right now. 1-6 Bravo 3. Oh, okay. Well, let me overwrite good data with older data, but that's fine. Okay. So let's do vulnerability management now. I'll have to talk to somebody about how to make sure that we get the latest content packages and make sure that they're in Customer Connect. But that's ultimately a different problem. Let's do this. So we're gonna grab the stuff for VMan. I'm still in the right place, right? Yeah. Okay. So I know that these are in Etsy Raws. That guy. And I'll just say, without actually checking, like 99% sure, there's already an open issue for the all the warnings that pop up. It's, to my knowledge, a perennial issue with some of the library loading um, as we go through uh, changes in both RAWs and Salt. This guy should be a little bigger. The vulnerability management content pack is slightly larger just because of the fact that we're bringing in the entire known to us database of security advisories. So it takes a little bit longer, but should be okay. All right. So what else do we need to kind of think about here? So that was running through all of those installation steps, kind of a standard install. So I think that's actually probably pretty good. Anybody who is doing a multi-node installation, you can pretty much dump the this stuff from your state tree or any of this stuff that you have in Pillar. If you're not planning to make this part of a whatever reinstantiate your SSE cluster on a periodic basis or something like that, then probably don't really need to hold on to those, and you can do whatever you want. But if there are any other concerns there, then those are things we can certainly address. And it's really thinking hard when it does this, isn't it? What does it look like in top? Load average is 1.54. Yeah, it's the celery workers kind of going nuts. And Redis also, because Redis is ingesting, I'm sorry, not Redis, Postgres is ingesting all the data that's getting thrown into it from that. So it's decrypting and unpacking that tarball and then having to shove it all into Postgres. So ultimately, this would go faster if I was talking to a remote Postgres probably. Well, not too remote, but a local high bandwidth connection Postgres that is able to use its own CPU cycles instead of having to share. So now it looks like it's probably the Celery queues are pretty much empty. Um, and it looks like Postgres is going crazy now. So probably is going through some of the stored procs on the back end. After all the data is in there, it has to kind of organize itself, populate some of the tables. And now there's another Celery worker spinning up probably to take care of like the UI updates and all that good stuff. So it looks like we're almost done here. All right, well, it's really going now. Okay, I'll let that go for just a second. Um, this guy's kind of busy, so I'll leave it alone too. In terms of, pretty much any of the other discussions as far as, what we need to see and do and all that good stuff, I'll try to make sure that I will talk a little bit to product and see if we can't get slightly better visibility into where the latest SecOps content is. I know we ran through a handful of changes in the SRE process to make sure that the right bits go to the right places, and that perhaps obviously or at least evidently doesn't necessarily result in exactly what you're thinking. This one obviously goes to a considerably older version of the stuff. This looks at least relatively recent, um, but that's still not quite, looking at what are we, a couple months behind now, is not really great. So I'll certainly take a quick look at that and see if I can kind of get attention into the right places there. Okay. Done yet? No? Okay. Apparently this is much nicer on the back end when you don't have to think about the fact that it's doing these things. Just for the sake of brevity, because we're coming up on a little over an hour now of total recording time. Um, I am going to pause this and I'll cut it back in as soon as the ingest is done. See you in a second. All right, there we go. I feel like I should have timed that now, but it looks like we're good. It ran through this, so it gives us some of the stats for how many CVEs and things it ran through. So we're at least relatively well aware that it kind of got through that process. Let's double check. Let me kill this terminal. System control status ROS. That's interesting. Oh, it's still trying to do translation. That's probably not super helpful. Um, Okay. All right. Before I forget, let's see, Roz. The other way that I had seen this was end. I don't know if that'll improve things, but I'll deal with that in a second. Okay. So restarted RAWs. That should be running now. Let's jump over here. Make sure that everything is working. Okay, cool. Okay, so compliance content and vulnerability content are at least present now. That part's good. Dashboard's working. I should see targets in here. It's weird. I should see. Oh, you know what I didn't do yet? I didn't do the master plugin. That's silly. Vault RAS, state.apply, API, C API, and the API plugin. So it's worth pointing out that you could do the same thing. If you want to apply this on multiple masters, you can just carry out the actual individual states against those guys. I don't know if there exists a guide right now that actually accommodates something like Postgres HA or something like that. But if you were doing multiple installations or whatever you want, multiple ROS heads, all those things. Oh, nice. Okay. Let's see here. Oh, really? How do I do that? Masters engine shouldn't be doing SSE API engine sync yet. I didn't go through the plugin install earlier, did I? Oh, I lost the session already. Or my scroll back's not far enough. Part of the way through handling the install, and then it did goofy things. Oh, is it expecting to? It's weird. Okay. Where do things go into now? Nope. Okay. I see a PV. It is in there. So then that should be fine. Okay. Its ID is going to be ROS. Its API cluster ID is salt. Yeah. SAPI server, HTTPS localhost. Validate start false. Oh, okay. Hmm. That's not great. Master runs solve the user and payload is root. That's unexpected. It is running as salt. What the log say? User and payload is root. That's really wonky. That's not where it goes. Um, there it is. Okay. Was it? Is that right? Um, huh. No, that's not a thing. Oh, no, still no. All right. Well, maybe I'll um, let me abort this for now. I'll figure out what I did with this part. Um, Ironically, the harder part, which is making Roz agree with itself, happened, and it's the master that I broke. But so let me look into that. This should give you some idea of how those things go. I'll unwind that last little bit of getting the master plugin installed. Um, Maybe I'll step back through the video and double check what happened when I was doing the install itself. Um, and then um, and then we can kind of go from there. But hopefully this gives you a little bit of basis for what that looks like. And then I'll fix this environment, and then hopefully if I come up with anything as far as follow-on recommendations in terms of not breaking your master during this process, then I can get those across to you in time. So I'll stop this for now. I will see you again soon. Take care.